guest speaker and participants. Welcome to the Indonesian Cyber Education Institute Universitas Terbuka webinar series on blockchain technology for higher education, supported by the Asian Development Bank, the Higher Level Technology Fund, grant from the government of Japan. I wish you all in a good health in this unprecedented pandemic COVID-19. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Daryono, the convener of today's webinar. We are very pleased to be able to organize the UT ADB webinar series that is planned to be done at least once in a month. As the blockchain technology has offered a more secure, verified, and interoperability standard of the digital credential, I believe this technology will transform university business process in the future. This first webinar received about 1,200 registered participants from various different affiliations. Today's webinar entitled Europass and Europass Digital Credential and will be delivered by Anthony Camilleri, ADB expert on the blockchain credential. This webinar is part of the ADB programs supporting the enhancement of the quality and nationwide access of tertiary education through online education in Indonesia. Before we get started, I would like to inform you that today in Indonesia, 55 years ago, on the 30th September 1965, was the national tragedy of the Indonesian Communist Party revolt, causing to lose hundreds of the Indonesian people, including the 10 national revolution heroes. For this, I would like to call a moment of silence to pay tributes to all the national revolution heroes. No, bukan Mas, bukan. Sorry, bukan. Okay, thank you very much. First and most, I would like to express my sincere appreciation and thanks to all of you who generously assisted us to make this webinar series become possible. First appreciation and thanks go to Professor Paulina Panens, who initiated the ICE Institute and ADB programs, and continuously dedicated to make this program success. Secondly, Ms. Lynette Perez, Mr. Sutarum, Dr. Marito Garcia, the Asian Development Bank, through the Higher Level Education Technology Fund, grant from the government of Japan, who kindly provide a continuous support. The last, Universitas Terbuka rectors, vice rectors, deans, and staff who give support and facilitations. Prior to the presentations, we are going to present the singing of the Indonesian national anthems and followed by the UT profile, and then continue the opening remarks by the Rektor of Universitas Terbuka. Without further ado, please honor and listen the singing of Indonesian's national anthems.
The fast-growing demands of digital era motivates us to continue improving the potential of integrated human resources that are capable to support productivity. This vast and rapid development needs an effective and modern learning solution that can keep up with the routines of today's society. A facility that can cope with the limitations of space and time. For many people, both limitations pose as major problems in developing themselves and enhancing their career in digital era. In the end, those problems will impact their lifestyle. Universitas Terbuka is here to answer those problems by applying an open and distance learning system. A system that has proven effective in increasing the coverage and equal distribution of excellent higher education for all elements of society. Our learning system. Our system allows students to have a flexible and open learning method, and it offers many advantages. First one is the registration period, which is open throughout the year, so no more worry about late registration. Flexible space, time, and place. This is useful for students who still want to develop their knowledge wherever and whenever they want. Easily access printed and digital teaching materials in all corners of Indonesia and other countries. Our system gives opportunity to people from all groups and ages to learn and develop their knowledge, as well as their skills in all fields. With 39 regional offices all across Indonesia and overseas service centers, we are always ready to support operational activities and cooperations with various national and international institutions. We have numerous facilities to support student activities and learning process, from UT Radio, UT TV, learning assistance to online library. Universitas Terbuka offers you 4 credible faculties: Faculty of Education and Teacher Training, Faculty of Law, Social and Political Sciences, Faculty of Economics, and Faculty of Science and Technology. With more than 35 study programs and postgraduate programs. Universitas Terbuka, making higher education open to all.
Prof. Daryono. Halo.
Can you hear me now?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So we now come to the opening remarks. I would like to invite Professor Ojat Darojat, Director of Universitas Terbuka, to give opening remarks. Please, Prof. Ojat.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Daryono. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for everyone, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bisa. Saya bisa.
Just before we get started, I would like to express my gratitude to our speaker, Mr. Anthony Camilleri, and also people from Asian Development Bank, Ms. Lynette, and others, and also to Prof. Daryono from Universitas Terbuka, and our colleague, Pak Toha, Bu Olive, and others. Also, I would like to express my warmest gratitude to all participants for attending this webinar. I think it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome you all to the first webinar series on blockchain technology for higher educations, organized by Indonesia Cyber Education Institute, or now we call it sometimes Universitas Terbuka Cyber, and Asian Development Bank atau IDB, on the topic of introduction to Europass and Europass digital credential. Everyone, ICE Institute is an integrated online learning platform that functions as a marketplace for online learning gallery for universities, as well as managing online learning system in Indonesia, not only for private universities but also for state universities. That was launched in August 2019 in Bali by the minister. And UT as a barometer and reference for all universities in Indonesia, especially in the development of online learning in Indonesia. It is assigned to develop ICE Institute together with other universities that have utilized online learning services, such as Institut Teknologi Bandung, Universitas Terbuka, Universitas Indonesia, ITS Surabaya, BINUS, UNES, and Universitas Gajah. One of the government missions through the Ministry of National Education and Culture is to improve the quality of tertiary education through the expansive of online learning services for public and private universities nationwide. And with the support of ASEAN Development Bank or ADB, the project will be the utilizations of blockchains for educational credential, whereas ICE Institute will be organized as the source of all sources that are eligible for credential in the system. So the blockchain will be able to support educational providers to be more efficient, resource sharing, and accountable to the increasing demands on the digitalization of educations. For our topic today, we will be focused on Europass digital credential with the immense experience and expertise of our speaker, Mr. Anthony. I'm definitely confident this webinar will facilitate us in a very constructive exchange of knowledge. So thank you very much all, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And back to Prof. Daryono.
Hello. Okay. Okay, I think thank you, Prof. Ojat, for the remarks. And can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, thank you. And now I think we come to the main agenda of this webinar series. But before then, I would like to introduce the speaker. Introduce the speaker, the Anthony Camilleri. He's the Tertiary Education Policy Consultant and the founder of the Knowledge Innovation Center. He has nearly 15 years of experience in educational policy with a focus on the quality assurance and innovations in education. He led the creation of the International Standard Organization's 21001 on Educational Organizations Management System and has authored a major report on the blockchain applications for education. His current focus is creating a European standards and technology infrastructure for recording learning digitally. This encompasses research on the policy implementations of the micro credentials, standardizations, work for digitations of the diploma supplement, and the consultancy with the Europass project and the European blockchain partnership on technological solutions. In autumn 2019, he also pioneered the first European micro credential masterclass in Slovenia. Please welcome Anthony Camilleri.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Good morning, everybody. The point of the presentation this morning is for me to share with you some of the insights we have learned in deploying a system for job management and for digital credentials across Europe as part of the Europass project. So first of all, what is Europass? Europass is not some kind of passport. It is meant to be a document which is used by learners and job seekers to translate their skills and qualifications across all 34 states of the European education area. This story starts in 2018 when the Council of Ministers of the European Union decided to launch what we call a common framework for the provision of better services for skills and qualifications. Essentially, what happened in 2018 was that ministers looked at the emerging job market in Europe and felt a need to promote the digitization of labor market information and of credentials. And in what is quite an unusual move for the Union, they actually passed legislation which mandated the European Commission to create a set of services to be able to launch such a product. Fast forward to 2020, and on the 1st of July this year, we launched the new Europass across the European Union. Who is the Europass for? Europass has two main sets of users. The first is stakeholders, and by stakeholders we understand that this should be a tool for universities, for guidance experts, for recruiters, for employers. But more importantly, it's also a tool for end users. And it's a tool which is meant to be used by learners, job seekers, volunteers, workers all across the European Union. In terms of what we offer three different sets of services. First of all, the portal allows you to self-assess your skills, and when you self-assess your skills, it can then help give you career recommendations and learning goals based on the skills you have. Secondly, it offers you a free online profile that allows you to highlight and promote those skills and qualifications. And thirdly, it gives you tailored information on job and learning possibilities, so recommendations for jobs and learning opportunities based on its knowledge of your skills. Furthermore, it allows you to create job applications and submit these to employers. It includes the ability to collect digital credentials, and, which is very, very important in Europe, it allows you to do this with full control of personal data in line with the EU's General Data Protection Regulation. All of this is translated into a set of components. So we talk about the Europass as having three components. The first component is the e-portfolio, which is the tool that allows you to identify your skills, search for jobs, create a profile, and submit this profile to employers. The second part of this is Europass digital credentials, which I will be focusing on later in the presentation. And Europass digital credentials essentially allow you to receive secure digital credentials and share those with employers. The third part is support information. And support information consists of information on how to learn and study in the various states of the European Union. Our idea behind all of this is not to create a CV template. So if we were just trying to create a CV template, let's say it wouldn't require this kind of effort, and a CV template isn't really something that is being demanded by the market within the European Union. Rather, our idea behind this tool is to give you an online profile from where you can manage your learning and your career over your lifetime. So the trends we are looking at here are that students increasingly learn not only in initial education, but continually update their knowledge throughout their careers. Quite often, people will be changing several jobs over a lifetime, and quite often they might even be changing country in which they are doing this. So the idea behind the Europass is that the Europass should be the home where you manage all of this education, all of this employment information, and where you can plan the next steps of your career or your learning. So just to give you an idea of the overall features here, for end users, what we allow you to do is essentially, first of all, create what we might call a comprehensive learning profile. Everything you have learned from universities, from non-formal education, is skills you have picked up along the way. You can record all of this in your profile. You can also in your profile add your career and learning goals, and for example say that in the next few years I am intending to change career, or I intend to do further training, or I intend to go into further studies. When you do this, you can then search for jobs and for courses across Europe, and those searching jobs and courses is also very, very specifically tailored to your particular profile. And once you've identified certain courses and jobs you are interested in, you can then create CVs where you select certain information items from your profile and submit customized CVs to each employer or educational institution based on their specific requirements. Second part of this is the tools we have for guidance practitioners. And for guidance practitioners, what we mainly provide is extensive information on learning and working in Europe. So as you might imagine, with 34 different countries within the system, and in certain countries such as Germany and Spain, which are divided into regions, you have multiple regions within that system. Somebody who is trying to work or study across Europe has to deal with different languages, different systems, different regulations. So what we've done here is that we have created essentially a database of everything people need to know to be able to apply for those jobs or for those learning opportunities. This can be consulted by guidance practitioners in a network of guidance offices which exists in all the countries, and essentially can serve as a reference for them to be able to better guide the job seekers or learners. Third part of this is the digital credentials, which I will focus on very shortly, and then digital credentials allow you to issue, store, verify, and share credentials. As mentioned, we only launched 3 months ago. In the first 3 months, the service has seen unprecedented success across the European Union. It's actually become the #1 visited website of the European Union, apart from the main websites of the Union itself. We have registered more than 3 million visits, and more than 600,000 people have created a profile in the system. We currently add around 10,000 new profiles every day. So moving from the Europass as a whole to a tighter focus on digital credentials. So what are digital credentials? Why have we looked at them, and why are we implementing them? So first of all, I should mention that digital credentials really are central to the European Union's policy agenda to advance skills. So in terms of digital credentials, we see that they are mentioned in a whole bunch of different policy documents. So each of these are essentially strategies and proposals issued by the European Union to promote education and training and employment. And all of these make reference to digital credentials and to the role of digital credentials in upskilling Europe's workforce. One of the key reasons Europe has decided to act in this area is to promote interoperability of systems. So generally, the European Union does not create services to compete with the private sector, and only develop services where there is a clear public need for a public service. So in this case, the reason we have chosen to act is that if you look at the credentials market globally, you find a significantly fragmented credential market. You have multiple different providers issuing credentials with multiple different standards, and quite often a credential that is earned within one learning system cannot be transferred to another learning system. It cannot be transferred to your human resources software. And ironically, even though we are moving from paper-based credentials to digital credentials, paper-based credentials are accepted everywhere. No employer or institution anywhere will tell you, I cannot accept this credential because it's on paper. Ironically, by moving to electronic credentials, we are actually moving towards a system that is less interoperable than paper if we allow the market to continue without any sort of intervention. So behind all of this, the EU said that it's time to launch a digital credentials infrastructure across the countries to provide a guide for interoperability and harmonization of these credentials. In trying to understand how we should design a system for these credentials, we had a few design considerations we needed to look at. First and foremost, we decided that it didn't make sense to create a service for credentials and tell everybody you need to use this piece of software to issue credentials. There are multiple reasons for that, but the main one is that even though the Commission had the mandate to create a system for digital credentials, the Commission did not have the mandate to ask for any existing changes to soft or hard legislation, which means we needed to design a system of credentials that would be legally valid in all 34 participating states without asking them to change their laws. The way to do this is, instead of creating a service, is to create an interoperability framework. Other design considerations we need to take account of is that the system needed to be valid across the entire European Union. Credentials should have a 40-year lifetime, and credentials should work with the software that is used in existing public service systems. One last consideration, which is extremely important to us, is the ability to combat diploma mills. So as you all know, online brings many advantages, but one of the big disadvantages of online learning is that it makes it infinitely easier to create fake, disreputable institutions and to issue credentials that look like the real thing. So especially because the digital credentials infrastructure has been being promoted by a government body, it is 100% important that users can have trust in those credentials and that users can be sure that any credentials in their system are issued by reputable providers. So finding a way to combat diploma mills was a very strong design consideration in our system. In light with the idea of trying to create a framework for credentials, the first thing we focused on was trying to create a common language by which we can understand what is represented inside a credential. So without common language to exchange this information, it is essentially impossible to create interoperability between systems or to have credentials issued in one country or issued by one institution understood by another. We did a search of all existing standards that exist for describing education, and we found that for the specific needs of Europe, none of the existing standards were sufficiently developed or sufficiently wide in scope from a lifelong learning perspective to match our needs. So for this reason, a major part of our project was to develop something we call the Europass learning model. And the Europass learning model is made up of 3 different types of information concepts. So our basic information concept is what we call a learning specification. And the learning specification is essentially a way to describe a learning standard. So a learning specification describes something which can be learned, it describes something which can be done, or it describes something which can be assessed. An example of a learning standard would be an occupational profile, it could be a competence framework, it could be a curriculum, it could be a classification of skills. These are all just, let's say, abstract documents which describe elements of learning. The second part of this is learning opportunities. And learning opportunities are simply courses. So learning opportunities are opportunities for a learner to achieve a unit of learning in a point in time. So a course, an apprenticeship, a voluntary experience, these are all learning opportunities which a learner may avail themselves of. Last part of this is that once you have used a learning opportunity, once you have learned something using a learning opportunity, you get a credential as the output of that process. And credentials describe a claim about an individual. It explains what an individual has done, what assessments they have done, and so on. Again, examples of credentials can be quite wide. They could be an attendance certificate, they could be a degree, they could be a letter of recommendation, they could be a diploma supplement. And essentially, the system we built across the Europass supports all of these different concepts. So, how did we implement these? So, first of all, on the specifications level, the Union has developed 2 tools. First of all, the ESCO skill taxonomy, and the skill taxonomy is essentially a set of around 10,000 skills and occupations, and there is a standardized vocabulary for describing learning outcomes, skills, and occupations, which is then translated into all different languages of the European Union. The second part of this is the Europass database of qualifications, which is literally a database of the different qualification standards we have across the Union. Second part of this, in the opportunities, we have what we call Europass database of learning opportunities, which is essentially a growing database of courses available across the European Union. So learners can search for courses across any country within Europe. The last part of this is the digital credentials infrastructure, which implements the credentials part of the learning model. To dive a little bit more into the specifics of the model, what do we actually describe in a credential? So first of all, a credential always contains some basic high-level information. So it contains metadata, which is data about the credential itself, such as the day it was issued, such as the type of the credential and other classification information like this. Secondly, it contains information about the issuer, which is information about the institution that's actually issuing the credential, typically the university or school, etc. It contains information about the subject, which is the person receiving the credential, and it contains an e-seal, which is a technological way of securing the credentials so that it's tamper-proof. If we think about claims about the person, what can we actually say about the person receiving the credential? And the data model we developed allows us to make 4 different types of claims about a person. First of all, we can make claims about activities. So activities are something a person has done. A person has done 150 hours of coursework. A person has done a 100-hour apprenticeship. A person has attended a seminar. The idea behind activities is that an activity says you have done something. But just because I say you have attended a seminar doesn't mean I can guarantee you have learned anything. So an activity certifies only that you have done something. On the other hand, if I would like to certify that you have learned something, we have a different class which is called an achievement. And an achievement contains learning outcomes as evidenced by an assessment. So, for example, I can say that you have received the achievement of a German qualification as a painter. And how do I know you've received the German qualification as a painter? Because you received grade B in your final examination as a painter, and that represents the learning outcome of the skill of painting. The third information concept, which our data model allows for, is entitlements. And entitlements are simply enough something you have the right to do as a result of that credential. So to keep our painter example, once you've received a qualification as a painter, in some countries in Europe, that is a regulated profession for which you need a license. And what we are saying here is that because you have achieved the qualification as a painter, you now are licensed to work as a painter. So that is the entitlement to work as a painter. Other examples of entitlements could be entitlement to join the medical chamber, entitlement to join the law bar, entitlement to apply for a higher educational qualification, etc., etc. And finally, we have a special type of concept, which is called an attestation. And an attestation is a special type of concept which is a credential that says something about another credential. Let me give an example here. If I am taking if I am taking a credential issued by MIT and I want to have that credential recognized in Finland, credentials from MIT are not automatically recognized in Finland. I have to submit them to a government office, which we call an enigmatic center, and that government office will say whether the MIT credential is a real credential or not. So that attestation is essentially the certificate issued by the office in Finland saying that my MIT credential is valid. Another important concept within this data model is the idea of micro-credentials. So the key element around micro-credentials is the ability to stack and combine credentials and to be able to take credentials from different providers and turn them into larger credentials. Example here, following a student journey. Let's assume that a student journey goes to the University of Nantes and achieves 90 credits in nursing from the University of Nantes. They then decide to go on a student mobility to the University of Malta and get a further 30 credits in nursing from the University of Malta. And then they decide to conclude their course by going to Finland and doing 600 hours of nursing practice at Tampere Teaching Hospital. Now, when you combine these three individual experiences together, they are awarded a bachelor's degree in nursing from the University of Nantes. Now, at the moment, what you see on the screen are four different credentials, three credentials for the individual components of the program, and a larger credential that is issued on the basis of those three smaller credentials. So what we are able to do with Europass digital credentials is essentially combine these into one stacked credential where your degree in nursing also contains the sub-credentials which you have earned through the various parts of your course. We can take this concept further, and let's say that the degree in nursing you have earned from Nantes in France, you want to have it recognized in Malta. So to do that, you submit it to this government office in Malta to ask to have it validated, and they would issue an attestation that the degree is equivalent to the Maltese degree in nursing. And again, this attestation would contain the degree in nursing, which in turn would contain the individual sub-credentials. And so what you can see here is a very, very practical use case of students receiving different credentials at different parts of their learning life cycle and having these combined and stacked into larger credentials as a kind of matryoshka doll of credentials. When we come to implementing the data model and actually turning these information concepts into a practical software system, we see that we need a software system that primarily has 5 functions. Identification of the learners who will be awarded the credential, having institutions issue credentials and send them to credential owners, storing credentials securely in a single online or offline wallet, verifying the authenticity of credentials, and sharing the credentials with other persons. And to explain to you how this works in practice, one of the good ways to do this is to compare what happens with a paper-based credential today and how we have implemented each of these steps of the physical credential issue process in the digital world. So let's start with issuing a credential. How does this work in a typical university? Typically, somebody at the registrar's office will have a list of the degrees which would be issued to each student at that university. And since typically degrees are issued on, let's say, special security paper or special ceremonial paper, that list is sent to a printing shop. And the printing shop creates a credential or a certificate for each student. So in the new Europass, we do exactly the same thing. We create, the institution starts with a list of the degrees or credentials which they want to issue in students. And instead of sending them to the print shop, they upload them to a piece of software we call the EDCI issuer. And once they upload it to that piece of software we call the EDCI issuer, the institution has that list of information turned into credentials which should be issued to each student. A very, very important part of our system is that while we provide an EDCI issuer under the European Union's domain, we also open source the software we use to create those credentials. So any provider can actually take our software and run their own version of the issuer without, let's say, needing to go through our systems if they choose to. Once the credential is issued, the next part of this is then that the credential is given to the student and the student keeps a copy of that credential. So again, in the paper-based world, how does this happen? Typically, the credential owner or the student will pick up the credential from the awarding body. They might have a graduation ceremony and receive the piece of paper directly from the rector, or they receive the credential via a registered delivery method. They might receive it by registered post or something similar. Either way, once the student has the credential, they are responsible for storing it safely for the next 40 years. They might store it in a safe, they might store it in a deposit box at a bank, they might store it under their mattress. In the new Europass, we have a similar situation. So we have two ways of sending the credential to the credential owner. We can send the credential directly to them by email, and then it's up to them to store the credential securely and to upload it to various platforms to view and to share it. Or we have the ability to create a kind of bank account for credentials where we can directly deposit the credential into that wallet or bank account. And so the university has the ability to essentially directly deposit credentials in a user secure storage. Where it's deposited in a wallet, the wallet is protected by highest levels of business continuity and backup. And instead of the user needing to take care of the security of the credential is indefinitely and securely stored in the Europass wallet. Again, there's no obligation to use the wallet issued by the Commission. Any provider can take the source code of the wallet we use, implement their own version of a wallet, and any wallet that is built according to our standards is considered to be interoperable with the other wallets. Third part of this is the verification. So one of the really important parts of using a credential in practice is presenting that credential to an employer and presenting it to be verified. So when you present a credential to an employer, what is the steps they go through to make sure that credential is real? If it's a credential coming from a university, the first thing the employer would need to do is check if this is a real university. Does this university exist? Is it a reputable university? Now, if you are having a credential from a large and well-known university, this really isn't a problem. If you're coming from a smaller, slightly less known university, this can get increasingly complicated. Within your own country, again, there's probably a list of accredited institutions you can refer to. If the student is traveling across borders, this might mean checking university lists in languages you don't even speak without the existence of a centralized resource of who are authorized universities to issue degrees. Assuming you have verified that the university really exists, the next step of this is to contact the awarding body to verify the credential is authentic. So there's no real way to know that a piece of paper in front of you is real. So typically you would ask for a certified copy via a notary or a certified copy from the institution, or you might get in contact with the registrar's office at that institution and ask them to confirm that they issued the credential. The awarding body will respond to this request. Typically, a university has a whole administration department that essentially answers these kinds of requests and provides support for these credentials. And then the last part of this is that you need, as the employer, to confirm that the person who is actually giving you the credential is the person who is actually described in this. So when you look at all of this, what you see is that the verifier makes a manual judgment of validity. But this entire process, from the beginning of the verification to the end, can typically take a number of weeks to get through this verification process. So what we are doing in the Europass is that we have essentially taken this verification process that can take weeks and reduced it to a number of seconds. So in the Europass, we have a database of all accredited institutions which we can use to verify the institution accredited. We sign the credentials themselves with a digital signature, which allows us to verify the authenticity of the credential automatically. And we link the user's login to the wallet to their real identity so that we can automatically match the credential owner with the person to whom the credential was issued. So the point over here is that every time you open the wallet, the credential is automatically verified in a number of seconds, which takes us to the... So all of these checks, when looked in a credential, end up looking like a very, very simple presentation. So you see that for a credential inside the system, you can present the format of the credential, you see the validation of the seal, that the credential is real, you can check whether the credential has been removed or revoked by the institution, you can check the accreditation of the institution, and you can check whether the credential is still valid. So a few more words on what the credentials infrastructure is and what it isn't before giving you a very short demo of the system. What we have created is a standardized format for digitally certifying and attesting learning, irrespective of its source. What we haven't done is created a new way of describing learning. We entirely based ourselves on describing the credentials that are already issued by institutions and presenting the information that institutions already present. Secondly, digital credentials are held by the student and they are shared by the student. This is not a system for universities to transfer information to other universities. Only the student can transfer information from one institution to another. Thirdly, it is an operative service. So we are already offering this to 600,000 people with 10,000 more per day. It is not a platform for experimenting with new technology. And finally, the idea behind all of this is to facilitate credential interoperability. It's not a set of rules for institutions or member states to follow. So after presenting all of the theory here, it would be good to give you a very short look at what Europass actually looks like. So this is the Europlus Portal, where you can find information about learning in Europe, you can find information about working in Europe, you can search for jobs, you can search for courses, you can search for information. The website is offered in 27 different languages, and the key of the website is your career dashboard. So in this example user, you can see that the user has identified their skills and they have identified what they are using the profile for. If I go to skills and I look for skills, I have a database of 10,000 standardized skills that come to me through ESCO, which I can use to describe what I know. So in this case, I'm going to say that the user has ability to use Microsoft Office and develop strategy to solve problems, and have these added to my profile. Once this is added to my profile, the courses I receive are customized for people who have this set of skills and wish to develop more. So for example, I am finding that a master's degree in economics and business with information about the course, as you can see, it is quite extensive, and this one is one that's offered in Slovenia because this user has indicated that they are interested in opportunities in Ljubljana, Slovenia. The second part of this is the profile. So the profile itself is a quite typical CV template. So you can see that there's the user's job experience, their education and training. We also have a bit where they can see their language skills, driving license, digital skills, etc., etc. And you see that you can create quite an extensive profile here. The magic of all of this, however, comes when you link the library into this. So as long as it's a profile, none of this is proven. There's no evidence for any of it. It's you claiming. So via the library, you can add evidence for any of those elements in your CV. And how do you do that? You do that via digital credentials. Now, because we fully appreciate that people may not only have digital credentials, but might also have traditional credentials, you actually can add scans of traditional paper-based credentials, which clearly are not verifiable. And you can also add new digital credentials and store them in the same profile or wallet next to one another. So you essentially can have all your credentials issued in different formats in the same place. If you click on the credential itself, you see that we get a summary of the credential, which looks very, very much like the piece of paper you would get from a university. But if I click on the credential details, I can get very, very detailed information about what is contained here. First of all, I get the verification check to prove to me that this is real. And then within this, I can see the information about my achievements, my activities, and my entitlements. So in this case, this is a certificate of excellence in creative writing. I can understand what creative writing means. I can understand what learning outcomes it had, volume of learning, credit points, entry requirements, all the detail a user would choose to put in. I also see information that the person got a grade of 88%, that this was an unsupervised assessment, and I can get more information also about how the grade was, how the assessment took place. I can see also the activities that were in this and the entitlements. It's critical to say that all the information within a credential is optional. So an institution can provide a very, very simple credential that says you have a diploma in nursing, doctor, or they could provide a 50-page credential where they explain in detail everything a person has learned in that course, and of course, all the options in between. I will leave you with a short video that, let's say, gives you an overview and summary of everything I have been saying, and then I would be happy to take any questions.
Sometimes life doesn't work out the way that it's all planned, but that's usually the best. I was born in the south of Germany to a Canadian mom and a German father, and they in turn had parents from the UK, the Netherlands, Ireland, and Italy. So I'm European Union all in one, right here. I went to business school in Germany and later on did a master's in international relationship in London. In between, joined one of the global strategy consulting firms, which over time led me to move to New York. But then in my late 20s, I realized that I wanted to do something for the world. In London, I met Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus and was very impressed by his work. And together we then decided to found Social Business. And so we've invested in so-called social businesses that help provide employment, education, healthcare, clean water, and clean energy to over 9 million people around the world. My job is really my life, but in a good way. And I feel that I can really use my knowledge of business and finance to change people's lives. My name is Saskia Brosten, and I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Social Business. I have my Europass. Do you?
Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. There are a number of the questions that already recorded by the committee. I would like to screen them on the screen. Could you please, the committee, screen them on the screen? Okay, this is the first questions. How to prevent the specific digital credential abuse from the cyber criminals or personal security?
Okay, I'm very happy you asked that question. We have a two-pronged approach towards this. First of all, credentials from a technological standpoint are XML files, and those XML files have to be digitally signed with something we call an ADAS digital e-seal. So essentially, within Europe, we have a system of certification authorities that are government approved. So to get a digital certificate from one of those certification authorities, the organization has to go present their company information, and once that has been verified, they get a digital certificate. You use that digital certificate to sign the credentials, and all the information in your digital certificate is included in the credential. So if I'm going to issue a fake credential, my business number, my contact information, and my registration number are all going to be on that fake certificate. So it would be very, very easy for you to find me. Second part of this is what about degrees? So for example, my company could issue a certificate claiming I am MIT and that I am accredited, and how would you know about this? So that second part is what we have an accreditation database for. So for degrees and for, let's say, important type of credentials, which are licensed by ministries of education, we have created basically an online list of all the registered providers. So apart from checking that you are who you really say you are, we then check if you are who you say you are, that you are on the list of trusted providers or of registered providers who are allowed to issue in the system.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I think that's good. I think that's part of the how the safeguarding mechanism that could be undertaken. Yeah, sure. Okay, the next question would be how Europass consolidate the different legal frameworks among the EU members.
The short version is we don't. We don't consolidate the legal frameworks at all. What we do is we provide an information model that can accept any of the information provided in any of the credentials in any of the legal frameworks. We specifically have no power to consolidate the laws of the EU. There's one exception to this, which is that there is a European directive which says that any document that is signed digitally in one member state is automatically considered as valid in the other. So the signature has legal validity across the European Union, but apart from that, we had to build a complex data model, which by the way has over 400 different properties, which basically can represent any information that exists in the legislation of any of the member states, and then we provided a way to map that information against each other.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. So there is no such kind of the directive or rules in terms of the EU in education?
No, because within the EU, education is what we call a matter of national competence. So countries decide their education policy. The EU can only coordinate and suggest, but it has no legal power in the field of education. Okay, thank you. And then next questions, please. How can the Europass main ways improve the standard of the employees' work performance, especially for the higher education interest, and how the impact of the environment developing the surrounding organizations? Can you get the main ideas, Anthony? Okay, well, what I can say on this is that A lot of CVs are focused on the beginning of finding employment, and then you kind of throw away your CV to some extent, and you don't visit it again until you change job 15 years later. Europass comes from a different concept. One of the main reasons we have connected the CV to the search for learning opportunities is we say that, listen, employees want to learn while they are on the job. They want to continue reskilling and retraining. And what is the best way to know what you should learn next? It's by understanding what you know now and what your pathway is. So basically, the way we help is by providing a career planning tool.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And is there any next questions? I think we still have another. Yeah. What is the main advantage versus LinkedIn profile sharing tools? Can we connect with the LinkedIn platform?
Okay, at the moment we do not connect with the LinkedIn platform. As you might imagine, having a government platform connecting to LinkedIn is a complicated issue politically. But in terms of comparing the platforms, the main difference between Europass and LinkedIn is the way we deal with data privacy. So when you upload your data on LinkedIn, you own your data, but LinkedIn also to some extent manage your data. You can actually create a Europass profile and CV without creating a profile at all. And essentially, let's say user privacy has been built into every level of the system. And all of this has been screened by the European privacy regulators. So the interest in the EU here was to create an interoperability service for employment that respects the very, very best practices in user data and which is, let's say, considered a public service and isn't owned by any one private company.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, next, I think we do have a couple of questions again. Do we have another questions? Okay, I think so. It's okay. That's all about the questions that we collect from the audience, and I think so. Thank you, Anthony, for elaborating and for the enlightenment regarding to the success story of the blockchain technology adaptations in the European Unions. And I believe that we have learned that higher education's transformations based on the blockchain technology is just on the way and ready to be launched. And I believe that this insightful presentations and discussion would enhance our knowledge related to the blockchain technology. Again, thank you again to all distinguished guests, participants and committee, and particularly to the speakers, Anthony Camilleri. And we are going to see you again in the ICE Institute and UT and the ADB webinar series next month. Please stay safe and healthy, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
It's very insightful. Thank you. Huh?
At Universitas Terbuka, tradition and innovation go hand in hand. As the first distance education institution in Indonesia, Universitas Terbuka was established to provide access to higher education for all Indonesians living across the country. Financial and geographical issues, as well as infrastructure challenges, were among the background to establish a massive open education system. Development of higher quality and more efficient infrastructure has significantly driven Universitas Terbuka to move forward. The development of user-friendly technology and the spread of mobile technology in rural areas have made a dramatic impact on the features of services and the characteristics of students. Having been promoted as the Cyber University of Indonesia, Universitas Terbuka has entered the new era of Industrial Revolution 4.0 by increasing the quality of learning services, infrastructures, and human resources. In doing so, Universitas Terbuka fosters and maintains effective strategic partnerships with domestic and foreign institutions. As a pioneer of distance learning in Indonesia, Universitas Terbuka was appointed to lead the establishment of the Indonesia Institute of Cyber Education, or ICE Institute. This institution is a regulatory agency to set standards in the distance learning. Recent improvements were carried out to provide meaningful learning services and opportunities, which include year-round registration system, pre-seasonal programs, learning clinic, modern curriculum design, enriched learning materials, interactive digital learning materials, guided e-learning that includes online tutorials, web-based tutorials, e-lecturing and e-seminar, online examination and online proctoring, employability skills training, and improve quality assurance system. The main goal of the initiatives is to improve student academic performance. Universitas Terbuka believes that constant regulatory and technological changes have created an increased focus on effective governance and quality. External reviewers and auditors, including the International Council for Open and Distance Education, ICDE, are frequently invited to provide an independent and high level of rigorous scrutiny to all aspects. In addition, through continuous research and innovation, on its way to advocate for the global open education movement, Universitas Terbuka will become a globally respected open distance learning institution.